The MMA fortune teller.
The teller. The teller. The teller. The teller. The teller.
The teller just punched in on the clock. We got UFC, ESPN plus 26. Paul Felder taking on Dan Hooker. The fight is taking place over in Auckland, New Zealand. This card's a little spicy. You know, a lot of guys from the land down under taking place in the card. And we're going to go in depth into this card here in a minute. But before we do that, we got to take a look back at last weekend. The teller absolutely dismantled this card. Corey Anderson versus Jan Blachowicz 2. Went 10 for 13 overall, all my fight picks. And the ones that count, as far as making my wagers, I went 3 for 3. So it really was an epic night for the teller. First and foremost, had to take that Merab Davashvili 7-unit play. I was sniping this fight for quite a while. I'm really high on this guy, Merab. I think he's going to push his way towards the top here in the near future. So keep an eye on him. Also, Scott Holtzman had to jump on that play as well, getting a line like I did. Jim Miller is a true legend, but he's just not on the level of a Scott Holtzman. As I touched upon last weekend, Scott Holtzman has a lot less miles, on himself, and he's just a fresher, stronger fighter in there, and he looked good in the fight. And then, of course, I had the underdog play of Diego Sanchez to take out Michel Pereira. One way or another, he was going to get it done. I like the value I got on him, and it paid out well. So other than that, as I said, I went 10 for 13 overall on the card. I did have Jan Blachowicz to win the fight. As I mentioned, I had Diego Sanchez as well. 2 underdogs in the co-main and main event. Not a lot of guys out there had those picks. So, if you guys could point me in the direction of anyone that was making picks like me this past weekend, I'd like to see it because the teller was absolutely on fire. So that was a great thing to see, and I really got to enjoy my weekend. Other than that, I got to check out Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship that took place down here in Fort Lauderdale. It was a very, very exciting event. For those of you guys that ever get a chance to check out BKFC live in person, you guys got to check it out. It's a very different atmosphere, I would say, than the typical MMA event. I got to meet some true legends this past weekend. You see Mike Brown, one of the head coaches over at American Top Team, a guy I've been watching for years. I really admire. I've been watching him since back in the WEC when he was laying out Uriah Faber multiple times. Got to hang out with legends like Gleison Tebow, Pedro Munoz. Bumped into Anthony Johnson, who looked to be in great shape. Talked to him a little bit about, if he's going to make a comeback, whether it's with BKFC or in the UFC. And he seems optimistic that there's a possibility. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Pedro Munoz, an awesome guy, man. A true, stud in the game right now, and a guy that's a real pleasurable guy to talk to. Other than that, I think I saw Bruce Leroy out there. Who else did we see out there? I mean, quite a few guys. If you guys remember Day 5000, I was chirping with him for quite a bit. The guy that fought Kimbo in Kimbo's last bout. And then, of course, I got to chat it up with one of the true legends, Dan Mergliotti. Couldn't have been a nicer human being. Makes me even really appreciate what he does in there even more. The dude was just hanging out with all the fans, talking, chatting it up after the fights. This is a guy that's been around forever. He's a big dude, I'll tell you that much too. So, the weekend, like I said, just an epic weekend. And now I'm excited to take the momentum from this past weekend, throw it forward to ESPN plus 26, Felder versus Hooker. And we're about to get right into that card here in a second. Couple of last-minute things. Of course, if you guys haven't already, hit that subscribe button. I'll keep this fire content coming out each week. Smash that like button. The way that YouTube's algorithm works, the more likes I get, the more that these videos get pushed out to people that haven't came across the page at this point in time. So it's always highly appreciated. You guys know as well as anybody, because you guys are here tuned in, nobody's doing it like the teller. Nobody's putting out these videos like I put them out. Nobody's done what I've done in such a short period of time in the fight pick game. I haven't even been around for a full year, and the amount of subscribers I have, the amount of likes I get on my videos, the amount of views I get, no one's doing it like me. You got these guys out here that have been around for years, and I'm already creeping up on their ankles. You got these other guys that have been around for years, and I already surpassed them within a couple of months. So you guys know what time it is. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. If you guys want to donate to the channel, it's always highly appreciated as well. I'll drop some links here in the bio. In no shape or form is it mandatory. It's just highly appreciated. That's up to you guys. And for those of you guys that want to sign up for my fight picks, I'm always willing to do business with you guys. I signed up a lot of people this past week before this event, and it worked out perfectly for them. Like I said, I went 3 for 3 on the event, and it was a true pleasure to put money in a lot of these people's pockets. So trust that will continue to happen. I'm already targeting 2 plays on this card that I feel highly confident about. So like I said, do not hesitate to get in touch with me. Check me over at Instagram at @MMAFortuneTeller_. Shoot me a DM or comment below to get my contact information from another source if you don't have Instagram. I think that pretty much sums all that up, and I think we're ready to get into this card. Auckland, New Zealand, let's go. In the first fight of the card, we got Priscila Cachoeira taking on Shana Dobson. Priscila Cachoeira, man, this is a girl, she's lost 3 in a row, and I really feel the UFC is giving her another shot here because they just don't even count that Valentina Shevchenko fight, and they respect her for taking that fight on short notice, hopping in when the UFC needed her, and taking that brutal beatdown that she took against Shevchenko. So, I think this is definitely an IOU type of fight. They're giving her one more chance. She's lost 3 in a row. She lost to Molly McCann after that, and in her last fight, she lost to Luana Karolina, who actually looks like she has some promise to her, Luana Karolina, but that still is 3 losses in a row. Priscilla's very tough, sometimes too tough for her own good. She needs to step it up with the skill aspect of her fight game. She has to work on her striking and all aspects of her game, her jiu-jitsu as well. She really has to step it up if she wants to get victories in the #1 organization in the world, that being the UFC. Shana Dobson, she's a 500% fighter. She wins three fights, she loses 3 fights. She's 6-6 in her professional career. She's only 30 years old. Her grappling is a little bit underrated. She's somewhat athletic, has decent striking. This is her fight to win here. She has to win this fight. Otherwise, we're talking about 3 losses in a row for her as well, and that's not going to be a good look. At least if you look at her losses, she lost to Sabina Mazo. That's a girl, you guys know how I feel about her. Feel she has a lot of promise, so no real shame in that loss. And then before that, she lost to Lauren Mueller. Mueller's a tough veteran, so that's a fight that you would expect Dobson to go out there and win. So she needs to make a statement right now against Priscilla. So the line's right around -180. This is not something that I would typically be looking to bet, but expect Dobson to go out there and handle business. We got a solid matchup here in Maki Pitolo taking on Takashi Sato, with the Hawaiian taking on the Japanese fighter in Takashi Sato. Both of these guys have shown promise in their career. Both of them have pretty good stand-up. I expect this fight to take place on the feet, and I think it'll be a pretty good chess matchup on the feet with their striking. Takashi Sato, this is a guy that the UFC brought in, and they had high hopes for him as far as being one of the higher caliber Japanese types of fighters. There's not too many of them in the UFC right now, so there's a couple here and there, but you know what I'm getting at. Came out, put Ben Saunders unconscious. It was a nasty fight. I believe I was actually there live. Yes, I was. That fight took place in Orlando. What was that? In Orlando back in... Oh, no, that was in Fort Lauderdale, actually. Yeah, that was in Fort Lauderdale. That was the Jack Hermanson Ronaldo Souza card. That's right. And he made quick work of Ben Saunders, put him unconscious. But at the time, Ben Saunders, until this day, Ben Saunders has been being put out by pretty much everybody that he steps in there with. So, that wasn't really enough to put Sato on the map. And then after that, they lock him in there with Belal Muhammad, a much more capable fighter than Ben Saunders at this point in the game. And Belal went out there and finished him with the rear naked choke. So, of course, Muhammad does have a lot of hype, coming behind him, a lot of momentum. So we're really going to see where Sato's at in his career at this point right now, taking on Maki Pitolo, because Pitolo is a guy who, like I said, shows a lot of promise on the feet, carries a lot of power. We saw him on Dana White's Contender Series putting that dude to sleep. The dude definitely has power in his hands. He's competent on the feet. But does he have the best fighter IQ? Is he as polished as Sato is? That's what we're going to find out here. Because you saw Pitolo in his next fight, he took on Callan Potter, and he lost that fight, and that was a fight he was a big time favorite in, and a lot of people thought that he would be able to get the knockout. And Potter used his grappling a little bit, used his fighter IQ and his experience to pull off that victory. So I consider Takashi Sato a pretty high IQ type of fighter. So we'll have to see how this fight takes place. I'm gonna go with coconut bombs though. I think that coconut bombs is gonna have a little bit more pop in his hands. He's gonna be a little bit more athletic, a little bit more fluid on the feet. I think the fight, like as I said, does take place for the most part on the feet. So I'll take Pitolo to get the victory. I think that loss is gonna light a fire under his ass. It showed him that this is the real game over here in the UFC. You have crafty veterans, guys that you may think that are not even that good of fighters, but they're in the UFC and they're there for a reason. So, this is a similar fight with Takashi Sato. This guy's no walk in the park. So I think Pitolo will take this fight serious and he'll get the W. How about Angela Hill stepping right back into the octagon within 2.5, 3 weeks? She was just out there, made quick work of Hannah Cyphers, and Angela Hill really looked good in that fight. In my opinion, probably the best we've ever seen her. Although she's getting up there a little bit in age, she does not have a lot of miles on her. She got into the game late, and you're starting to see her overall MMA game really start to come around. And this is a solid matchup here. She's taking on Lookboonmee, the Thai fighter, who has some great Muay Thai. She trains over there, Tiger Muay Thai, one of the best Muay Thai camps on planet Earth. So, she's getting proper training. She's small, though. She's only 5'1". I think she's going to be at a little bit of a size disadvantage here in this fight. And it's going to be hard to pick against Angela Hill right now in a fight like this. I don't care if this fight takes place in the feet or if it hits the mat. I just think Angela Hill is really starting to hit her stride. Although, if the fight does take place in the feet, which it has a strong possibility to do, this girl, Loma, like I said, has good Muay Thai, so she can keep the fight close. It might be a lot closer of a fight than a minus 200 type of betting range, to grab Angela Hill that you might feel comfortable with, depending on how you look at that. I'm not going to say I'm jumping on this, but you take a look at Luma's last fight. She had a close fight against Alexandra Albu, a close fight that took place in the feet. So it could be something similar to that fight. But I'm going to take Angela Hill. Like I said, it's going to be really hard to pick against her in matchups like this. I feel like the UFC is still kind of grooming her, even at the age that she's at. She's up there in age. I think the UFC is going to give her one last little run at the title if she's able to, continue to string off victories and beat these girls that she should beat. So we'll see how this fight goes. And speaking of making a quick return to the octagon, we got Kara-France, who just fought 2 months ago. Took on Brandon Moreno and took that loss, and that was the first loss that he got dealt in quite a while. So, he's going to be definitely excited to get back in there and get back in the win column. Fighting a tough customer in Tyson Nam. For those of you guys that remember Tyson Nam, he made his UFC debut against Sergio Pettis. And that fight took place quite a while ago. That was the fight that caused Sergio Pettis to get cut. Even after pulling out the victory against Tyson Nam, completely styling on him. I think he even had some type of striking record in the fight. He was really just jabbing him up. The UFC did not like the way he fought that fight because he never pushed the pace and actually went in for the finish when he had chances that he probably could have. He kind of just was on his back foot using the jab, and that's obviously why the UFC cut him, in my opinion. Just had to touch up on that a little bit. Tyson Nam was walking him down, trying to engage, and that's the type of fighters that the UFC are looking for. So you see Tyson Nam getting another shot here against Kara-France. Kara-France is a guy that's very well-rounded, very underrated in my opinion. Continuously has been pulling off victories for some time now. Although, he hasn't really fought some of the best talent, in his last 10 fights. The time has come now, though, where we're going to start to see him fighting some of these guys. And I'm not saying that Tyson Nam is that guy, but, guys like Brandon Moreno, and you'll see, after this fight, he'll probably get a victory here, and then they'll throw him in there with someone tough again. So we'll see how Kara-France does in the near future. Tyson Nam, he has a traditional martial arts type background. He's very fit. He's an athletic type of dude. But this should be Kara-France's fight all day, in my opinion. I just think he's more well-rounded. believe it or not, Kara-France is only 26 years old as well. So, this guy's going to be better every time he steps in there as well. People don't realize he's a young blood in there. So, I got to take France to win the fight. As far as betting goes, the line's high. France is almost, like a minus 260 right now. That's a tough line to take, with France coming off a loss. This guy Tyson Nam, we've seen him. Even if you're throwing bows on him, you're coming at him, he's still going to press you. He's going to march forward. So a lot of times fights like that, they end up playing pretty close in the judges' scorecards. I'm not sure if he has the skills to hang with Kara-France. We'll have to see how it takes place. But France to win the fight. Looking over to the welterweight division, we got Callan Potter taking on Kenan, the Assassin Song. Kenan Song, this guy is a very slick striker. Was put in time over at Tiger Muay Thai. I like the guy striking. This guy tends to get a lot of finishes. Very slick on the feet. Callan Potter, we just talked about him, not too long ago in regards to one of the earlier fights. Callan Potter is a very crafty, probably an underrated type of fighter. With his record 18-8, a lot of people sleep on this guy, but he's crafty, he's strong. He'll clinch you up, he'll hold you against the cage, and not the most exciting fighter, but he can slip in victories here and there, as we saw in his last fight. Kenan Song's coming in almost at a 2-1 favorite, which was a little bit surprising to me, I guess. I do expect him to win this fight. I think he's a little bit more slick on the feet. He'll be a little bit quicker. And overall, his game is coming around. He just has to avoid being held down or, controlled against the cage and out-grappled. And, if he's able to get his shots off, I could see him getting a knockout as well. So I definitely would say that this is Kenan Song's fight to win. As far as 2-1 odds, though, I would like the line. I would expect the line to be a little bit lower, but we'll have to see how it plays out. His only setback in his last 4 fights was against Alex Morono, who at the time, Alex Morono was on a tear, although Morono did just have that major setback where he just got knocked out in a devastating fashion. But, Song has beaten guys like Derek Krantz, Hector Aldana, Bobby Nash, not the most skilled of fighters, but, tough, capable fighters. So, he got 2 knockouts in 3 of those fights. So, he's looked good at times. He does have some questionable losses on his resume. He's lost to some guys that are, not the most notable, like this guy Elner Agov, who, that's a fight he probably wished that he could have had if they ran that back. But, it's the fight game. Anything happens. And I expect Song to pull this victory off this upcoming Saturday. Staying in the welterweight division. Now, this is a fight that I'm excited for on this card. We got Emil Weber Meek taking on Jake Matthews. Emil coming off 2 losses. The Viking fighter, man, fighting out of Norway. He's a fighter that always brings it. Doesn't always have the best fighter IQ. In fact, has had some of the worst fighter IQ I've ever seen in some specific fights. In specific, his last fight against Bartosz Fabinski. That was a fight that if he could have just sat back a little bit, not rushed the fight as much, he wouldn't have continuously been taken down. Fabinski was almost out of that fight. If you guys remember the way that took place. Of course, the Kamaru Usman fight, he did the same thing in a couple specific times, but the difference is, Kamaru Usman is a world-class, the welterweight champion of the world, so it's a little bit different. But still, the way that he rushed in at times after he would land a strike, he's really susceptible to being taken down, being put on his back, and being rode out for minutes at times. So that's one thing I do not like about him. Some of the pros about him, though, man, this guy is ferocious. He has power. He can knock anybody out if he lands. I would like to see him clean up his technique a little bit. But, at times in that Usman fight, he looked good. He connected a little bit. So, now taking on a guy in Jake Matthews. Jake Matthews, the young buck, who's been around for a long time. I'm high on this guy. I think he's a good fighter. I really do think he's a good fighter. He had that one setback as of recently against Tony Martin, Anthony Rocco Martin, where he did get caught with that anaconda choke. But other than that, he won 4 of his last 5 fights. Has been looking pretty good. But, it's tough to say with him. There's been some times in this guy's career where I thought he really had a lot of potential. But then, he's had some questionable losses here and there. The Andrew Holbrook loss, of course, that one was not a good look. The Kevin Lee loss, Kevin Lee's a solid fighter, so no real shame in that. And the Tony Martin loss I touched upon. Tony Martin is a solid fighter, so This will be a good fight to see, to see how this plays out. Emil Meek, as we talked about, this guy is very tough. He's going to bring the fight. I would like to see Jake Matthews use his fighter IQ to get some takedowns, use some top time in this fight, for the judges' scorecards. He'll be the hometown favorite here, so, if it goes to the judges' scorecards, that will give him a good edge. He should use his grappling a little bit. I don't think it's the best idea if he sits and just, trades with Meek in the middle of the octagon where anybody can get caught. Like I said, Meek carries a lot of power, and he could put Matthews to sleep at any given time, that's for sure. As far as betting-wise goes, as the betting line goes, man, a lot of people really think Jake Matthews should run away with this fight. He's up in the minus 200s, and to me that was a little bit surprising for the fact that I think that Emil Meek is dangerous, and anything could happen in there. But I think a lot of it has to deal with his fighter IQ and how he looked in his last fight. Emil Meek has had a lot of time off since his last fight, so I'm sure he's been working on his grappling and polishing up his skills. He's only 31 years old, so if you're hitting that Jake Matthews line up where it is, you better be careful you don't have too much money on it, because that can clean you out. Don't be surprised if Meek pulls the upset here. Of course, I got to go with Jake Matthews to win the fight, but do not be surprised if Emil Weber Meek pulls this fight off in Viking fashion with a devastating finish. Jalin Turner making his UFC return, coming off a tough loss to Matt Frevola. Side note, I did capitalize on that play, had Frevola at underdog odds. I knew that was a good shot to go in on when I had that fight basically capped at pick'em. So I think I got Frevola around plus 140. But that was some time ago, back in 2019, all the way in April, almost a year ago. Now he's taking on the UFC newcomer in Joshua Culibao, who's undefeated 8-0, has taken out everyone that they put in front of him. One of the problems I do see with his resume, though, is the level of competition. The guys that he's been taking out are really not on the level. Whereas Jalin Turner, he's already had 3 fights in the octagon against some top-tier talent, against guys like Vincent Luque. Matt Frevola is a solid fighter as well. And although he lost both those fights, he's been locked in there with those types of guys. He's finished Callan Potter in the first round, looked good on his Dana White's Contender Series fight. And Jalin Turner's only 24 years old. So remember that. The guy's a young buck. He's 6'3", has almost a 76-inch reach, which is it's a big frame for the weight class. I do think that Turner will start to string off some victories here in the octagon. I'm going to have to pick him in this fight. I do think that this guy Joshua is dangerous, and if he connects, he could put Turner away. We've seen that Turner's been he's been susceptible to being knocked out. He's been knocked out by Richard Leroy on the local scene. He's been knocked out by Ronnie Borgia, another guy you probably never heard of, and of course Vincent Luque had a deadly knockout on him. So at only 24 years old, Turner's chin has already been it's been put through some work already, so he can be put out at any time. Don't forget that. Still got to go with him though. He's had a nice 10 months to take things in consideration, to rest up the brain and to become a better fighter. At only 24 years old, this guy's going to take his game to another level here, and I expect him to win this fight, but would not be surprised in the least bit if he's put to sleep. We'll have to see how this one takes place. We got one of Khabib's little disciples here, Zubaira Tukhugov, a.k.a. The Warrior, a.k.a. The Mad Rat, taking on Kevin Aguilar. Kevin Aguilar, always a tough customer. So this guy Zubaira, this was one of the guys that jumped inside the octagon when Khabib and Conor had that whole melee. I believe this was the guy that Conor cracked with the left straight. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is the guy that Conor connected on as Conor was getting hit in the back of the head. A lot of people thought that he was never going to step back into the octagon after jumping in the cage the way he did, but he since has, and he had a very awkward fight in his last fight against Lerone Murphy. It was a fight that, he was looking good in the beginning of the fight, and it ended up going down as a split decision draw, which really was a loss for him because he was in complete control of that fight in the beginning part of the fight, and he started to fade from what I remember. His cardio didn't look good in that fight. Now he's fighting a guy in Kevin Aguilar that's going to be throwing down to the last minute of the fight. You got to love Aguilar's style. Although he is coming off a loss to Dan Ige. Dan Ige is, in my opinion, one of the more underrated guys that's probably working his way towards the top of the game right now. So no real shame in that loss. And before that, Aguilar was stringing off victory after victory. His only other loss was against Leonard Garcia years ago, back in 2013. So, Aguilar's a tough customer, and he will bring this fight, the entire fight, as I said. So if Zubaira is going to start to fade, this is not going to be the guy that you're going to want to fade against, because Aguilar will keep coming. You got to give the grappling edge to Zubaira, in my opinion, but Aguilar is no slouch either. He can stuff takedowns. He can keep the fight on the feet, and he could use his boxing there. From there, it's going to be interesting to see who has the edge as far as the striking goes. I've kind of been back and forth with who I think has the edge as far as the striking goes. And the line really tends to agree with me. I mean, this is basically a pick'em fight. I've been back and forth on this fight. I'm going to go with Aguilar at this point now. I just give Aguilar a slight edge as far as the striking goes with his boxing. I give him an edge with the cardio and his toughness. Whereas I will give Zubaira the edge as far as his grappling goes, especially in the beginning parts of the fight. I think he'll be more explosive. He has that Dagestani Sambo type wrestling where he can get an edge as far as that goes. I don't know if he's going to be able to hold Aguilar down and seal the fight like that. So I'm going to go with Kevin Aguilar to pull this off. We got a local boy throwing down on the card in Brad Riddell, fighting out of New Zealand, taking on Magomed Mustafaev, who had a spectacular finish in his last fight against Rafael Fiziev. That was back in April of 2019. I remember I was just hopping out the shower. I had the Fight Pass going down on my phone, and I was like, holy shit, man. It was a quick knockout, too. First round knockout. Didn't even get to get settled in for the fights. It was an early card that day, too. I forget where it took place, but it was an early card. This guy's a dangerous fighter. His kickboxing's nasty. The guy's shredded, very strong fighter. His only loss all the way, back to 2013 was against Kevin Lee, which no real shame in that. Other than that, this guy's been finishing a lot of people, finishing people with slams, knockouts with the hands, arm bars, triangle chokes. The guy's well-rounded. I've liked what I've seen from this guy. He's dangerous. But now he's taking on this guy, Brad Riddell, who I also like. I think Brad Riddle's a pretty decent fighter with some good boxing, some good Muay Thai. He's coming off a nice solid win against Jamie Malarkey. That was a fight where he had two hometown fighters in there locking horns, and Riddle came out the victor. And I liked what I saw from him. He has a lot of finishes on his resume too for the limited amount of fights that he's had. And don't get it twisted. He is a striker, and this is going to be a striking matchup. And I'm going to have to edge Magomed to win the fight from what I've seen from him in his last fight, and even going back to the past. The guy's dangerous, and I think we could definitely see somebody get knocked out in this fight. And I just slightly edge Magomed to get that knockout or just to get the better of the striking. So got to go with Magomed Mustafaev. Karolina Kowalkiewicz taking on Xiaonan. Karolina Kowalkiewicz, man. This one brings a tear to my eye to look at her matched up against Jan and seeing the line like this. You see a picture of her here back when she was young, back when the only people that could defeat her inside the octagon were two women, Claudia Gadelha and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Other than that, she would go in there and handle business. If you had money on her, she'd constantly put money in your account. And then all of a sudden, she bumped into Jessica Andrade. Andrade put her out. Michelle Waterson styled on her, and then Alexa Grasso styled on her. So it's been a little disappointing, especially the last matchup against Alexa Grasso. You really kind of just saw that Karolina is just on her way out the game. After she loses this upcoming weekend, that's going to be 4 fights in a row. I don't even know if we'll be seeing her inside the octagon again. And and this was a girl that was undefeated up until her match with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and up until that time, she was one of the few fighters that actually gave Joanna a solid fight. She sat there and she exchanged with her. It was a beautiful striking match. She had victories against Rose Namajunas back in the day, Randa Marcos, Jody Escobar, Felice Herrig, just some notable names. But a lot of people were high on her. A lot of people thought she would be a staple in the division for time and time to come. And, the times have changed. Now you have young and hungry fighters that take this game very serious, like this girl, Jan. She's 30 years old, so she's not super young at this point, but doesn't have a lot of mileage on her. She only has 11 fights, and she's looked good. Just took out Angela Hill. Not a lot of people can say they beat Angela Hill as of recently. Viviane Pereira, Siri Kondo. Not the most notable names, but she's been looking good. Her striking's good. You could tell she takes the game very serious. And a lot of these Chinese fighters are starting to make a name for themselves. From what I've seen from Karolina Kowalkiewicz, especially in her last match, it would be really hard to pick her. It's just the way that she's even losing these fights. Her striking sloppy. She's just trying to land something at all costs, and she's just not even setting up her strikes, just flailing her hooks out there, getting hit constantly. Her defense is horrible, and I would have to say that I expect Yan to style on her in this matchup. The line is pretty steep. It's up in the minus 200s, but you have to expect that Yan is going to outstrike Karolina Kowalkiewicz in this fight. If Karolina can make it a gritty fight, maybe put her up against the cage, throw some elbows, use a little bit of clinching and whatnot, maybe she could pull something off. She would have really had to have taken this fight very serious and really pushed to get another victory inside the octagon, knowing that her back's against the wall. But I'm not going to be able to pick Karolina Kowalkiewicz to win this fight, so I got Yan. Moving our way to the heavyweight division, we got Marcos Rogério de Lima taking on Ben Sosoli. This guy, Ben, the combat wombat, this guy is an absolute tank. In my opinion, I think this guy has one of the toughest chins in the UFC, period, or in the fight game. You see the way that he just walks his opponents down. He's coming off a no contest. Of course, that was the fight that he probably should have lost against Greg Hardy. They overturned it because Greg Hardy used his inhaler. But you could tell that Greg Hardy was nervous of this guy. He did not want to exchange. Ben Sosoli was walking him down the entire fight. I didn't like how Ben did not know how to cut the cage off, though. Needs to learn how to cut that cage off. You can't just chase your opponent around the octagon. Cut that cage off. If you really want to engage and you want to throw down and see if you can get that knockout to win the fight, cut the cage off and then really engage. So that was the one little thing, I had about him. But the guy is not scared to take a shot. I don't doubt that for a second. And the guy's chin is made of granite. You could definitely tell that. Other than that, he also had a no contest on Dana White's Contender Series. For those of you guys that remember that fight against Dustin Joyson, that was a fight where that guy, Dustin, he'll never get a chance in the UFC ever again, and I don't ever want to see the guy fight either. Had a very... it's a very minor eye poke where, don't get me wrong, I know what it's like to be poked in the eye. It's nothing to joke about. But the way that he got poked and he instantly looked for a way out of that fight was disgusting. Whereas you can tell this guy, Ben Sosoli, was just a tank and he was ready to go. He's actually quite nimble for his size, too. He's a stout dude. He's a little short, but he's kind of nimble with his footwork. And I think that we'll see this guy, Ben, knock a few customers out inside the octagon over the course of time. I think he will connect on a couple guys. I think he does carry some power. In the local scene, he's already knocked out multiple guys. And then you got Marcos Rogério de Lima. This is a guy that's, he's big. He's a solid guy for the weight class. Coming off a loss against Stefan Struve. In a fight, he had it in the bag, and then Struve made his little comeback, got the arm triangle choke. It's always a good thing to see Struve get a victory inside the cage. A big fan of that, guys. Before the Struve fight, he did defeat Adam Wozarek. Not the toughest customer out. OSP did finish him before that. He's been back and forth, win, loss, win, loss. He beat Jeremy Kimball before that. Jeremy Kimball is a guy that was a champion in the local scene, but really could never put it together inside the octagon. For the most part, Marcos Rogério de Lima literally is loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win. It's just been back and forth. And now, against Ben Sosoli, how's this fight going to take place? If they engage and they strike, I think Sosoli can easily knock him out. But I edge Rogério on a couple different aspects of the game. I think his jiu-jitsu is better. I think his size is better. Or he has better size, and he could use that to his advantage. Striking is there as well. It's okay. But I don't know, man. Ben Sosoli. I think I'm going to have to ride with the dog in this one. I'm going to take Ben Sosoli to win this fight. We'll break the pattern. I think Rogério de Lima is going to lose 2 in a row here instead of doing his normal back and forth. I think Ben Sosoli can connect. I think his takedown defense is good enough to keep the fight standing. If Rogério tries to use his jiu-jitsu, I don't think he'll be able to. I think Sosoli's stout. He's very low with his center of gravity. I think he can stuff the takedowns and he'll have the hometown edge as well. So maybe a close decision or he gets the knockout. I'll take Ben Sosoli, the dog. Jimmy the Brute Crute making his return after a devastating loss against Michał Oleksiejczuk. Yeah, man, Jimmy Crute, for those of you guys that remember his last fight, that was a fight that I think he wins 8 out of 10 times. I think he was on his way to win that fight if he would have slowed the fight down. Got way too reckless in there. You know, you could see his age and his experience really came into play. You know, and it was against a tough customer. I'll give him that. You know, Misha Serkinov is no joke. The guy's an absolute tank. He has good jiu-jitsu. He's been around the block. You know, and Misha pulled off that Peruvian necktie, but that was a match. You know, Jimmy Crute was getting the better of him. He almost got the finish early. He just needed to pump the brakes, and he would have cruised into victory. That was one of my plays that night. It was something that I won't forget because I was quite annoyed with that. Although I did hit a couple nice plays other than that night, but still, it should have been a beautiful night. That Jimmy the Brute Crute kind of messed the night up a little bit, but no shame in it. He's a young customer. He's only 23 years old. Remember that. He's only 23 years old. This is a guy that will be around for a long time. You know, this guy he's going to be the hometown hero. You know, taking place this Saturday. The crowd will be definitely rooting for him. A lot of Australians will be there. And he's fighting a very tough customer in Michał Oleksiejczuk. This guy is absolutely no joke as well. And although he is coming off a tough loss against OSP and a fight that everybody had him winning, the line was very high on him. You know, up until that time, he's just been on a tear. I think he was on a 12, 13 fight win streak, something like that as well, 10 to 13 fight win streak. He was just styling on everybody. You know, you saw what he did to John Villante on the feet, what he did to the big Dagestani fighter. He finished him in a nasty way, you know, before his last fight. And then and he was looking good in the OSP fight before he got caught with that choke. He did start to slow down a little bit. He looked a little weird in that fight. But OSP is an underrated fighter. OSP is a crafty guy. And that Von Flue choke, everyone knows, should be named after him at this point in the game. OSP has really just patented that choke at this point in time. So Jimmy Crute, man, taking on Michał Oleksiejczuk. This is a tough one for me. This is a tough one. Crute is coming in as the slight dog. I think Crute will have a little bit of better cardio. And I don't know, man. I've been on the fence with this. I'm going to make a selection right now. You know, I've really been back and forth. I think the value's on Crute, and I'm going to take Crute to win the fight as well. I think he gets it done. 24 years old. I think he's going to learn from his previous loss that he just had. I think it'll help him understand the game a little bit better. He has to slow things down when he hurts his opponent, and I think his cardio is better, and I think his jiu-jitsu is great. I think his striking is very good. I think he's a little bit more well-rounded. And yeah, I think that Michał showed that, you know, he's not as great as everyone thought that he was. I think he's still a very solid fighter, and I think he'll be a threat in the division. But I think that Jimmy Crute's going to get it done. We've made it to the main event of the card. We're going to get into it here in a second. If you guys have not already, smash that like button for your boy. And please subscribe if you haven't done that as well. It's always highly appreciated, as I always tell you guys. And without any further ado, let's check out this main event. Paul the Irish Dragon Felder taking on Dan, the hometown hero Hooker. This is a great matchup. Shout out to Mick Maynard and all those guys out there. I think this is a great matchup. Two guys that are going to engage, strike in the middle of the octagon, give the fans a show to top off the event. And, of course, Dan Hooker being the hometown hero out there. You know, Dan Hooker, this is a guy, you know, that was really on a tear up until that Edson Barbosa fight and then bounced back with 2 solid victories after that as well and looked spectacular in them against James Vick and Al Iaquinta. Really styled on both of them. Of course, I know you guys didn't forget what he did to James Vick. Turned James Vick into the Homer Simpson of the MMA game. When James Vick tried to label Gaethje with that, James Vick ended up turning into the Homer Simpson of the fight game. But, you know, yeah, Dan Hooker is absolutely no joke up until this point in the game. This guy's a stud. And Paul Felder, although if you look at his resume, it says that he's only lost 1 of his last 5 fights. That's really not the case because he lost his last fight. He absolutely lost to Edson Barbosa. I don't care what you guys say. I'm not going to say Barbosa completely outclassed him in there, but he won the fight, period. So I'm not a big fan of robberies. I don't like to see stuff like that. But nevertheless, Paul Felder did put up a decent fight. And before that, he looked good against James Vick as well, but didn't get the finish like, you know, our boy Hooker did. And then he got beat down by Mike Perry before that. For those of you guys that remember that fight, man, it was a split decision, but Mike Perry was fucking brutalizing Felder in that fight, chasing him around the octagon, dropping elbows, dropping power shots. And I know it was up at welterweight, but, that was a fight that, I don't know, maybe I thought Felder would have, outpointed him and did what a lot of people do to Mike Perry in order to pull off that victory. But Paul Felder is a solid fighter. This is a guy, that's made a name for himself in and outside the octagon, doing a lot of commentary up until this point. I admire the guy. He's a very skilled fighter, very, very skilled striking. He has nasty taekwondo and a lot of traditional martial arts. The guy's a nasty fighter. I'll never forget when I first saw him in the UFC against Danny Castillo, when he landed one of the nastiest spinning back fists I've ever seen. So the guy is a deadly fighter. I would like to see him push the pace a little bit. At certain times, I feel like he kind of cruises in the fights, and he kind of leaves it up to the judges, and I don't really always like that. Dan Hooker right now, Dan Hooker's going for the kill when he steps in there, and I'm going with Dan Hooker. It's in his hometown. He's been going on a tear as of recently. He's really putting it together. He has a great frame for the weight class. He's big in there. He has a nice reach, almost 76 inches of reach at that weight class. It's very good at the lightweight division. And, man, Dan Hooker's the real deal. He's 30 years old. He's in his prime, training over at I wouldn't say one of the premier camps, but his camp's really been putting it together, putting in work with Izzy over there, Israel Adesanya. This guy's the real deal. I expect Hooker to I don't want to say he's going to get the knockout, but it's definitely possible. I expect him to win the fight, though, possibly with a knockout. I expect for this fight to be a war on the feet, a 5-round war where these guys really are going to engage, and whoever shows more heart and who lands the crisper shots is going to start to pull away with this fight. So I got Dan Hooker. So that's going to wrap up UFC Auckland, New Zealand. I think we got a solid main event that we're going to be able to enjoy this upcoming Saturday. As I talked to you guys about before, do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'm going to have a minimum of 2 plays on this card, if not more, but a minimum of 2 plays that I feel very confident about. Of course, I'm coming off the 3-for-3 night this past weekend. I'm taking that momentum. I'm telling you guys, we got more money to pick up, and you guys got to ride with me. I'm telling you, you guys shoot me a DM on Instagram. Comment below if you don't have Instagram or whatnot. Remember, the Instagram is at @MMAFortuneTeller_. And like I said, I'm willing to work with you guys on the price. I will give you guys some excellent deals. Reach out to me. Let's do this. And other than that, you guys enjoy the fight. Signing out.
The teller.